Hello, this is lecture 28 and part number 4 on the 10 Commandments. And this is our final lesson on the 10 Commandments. This will be a short lesson this evening. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here tonight. So your Friday night will only have a little bit of time that you'll be listening to this. But I wanted to just give you something in closing. The 10 Commandments, or the Decalogue as it is called, as it has 10 words, as the Jewish scholars call it, the 10 words. The Decalogue is God's moral law for man. This is not something that's been done away with. There is this misconception out there that we only follow the commands of Jesus. There's no other commands that we follow. That's ludicrous. The moral commands of God have never been done away with. What was morally reprehensible before Jesus came is still morally reprehensible. When the law is not kept, there will become immorality, there will become ungodliness, sin will run rampant. The curse of God will be on a nation, it'll be on a people, it'll be on a church, family. Any part of society that does not want to obey the moral precepts of God will see a decline. In Deuteronomy 11 and verse 26, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing, if ye obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and a curse, if ye will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside out of the way, which I command you this day, to go after other gods, which ye have not known. So God set before them, he said, here is a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you'll do what I tell you morally, and a curse if you don't. I want you to think about the people you know that have chosen to violate the moral laws of God. You think about those people, and it never turns out well for them. It never does. Oh, things might look like they're going cheery and chipper for a little while, but eventually it falls through. Eventually they suffer greatly for it. The Decalogue is in two parts. The first 4 parts of the Decalogue teach us how to maintain our relationship with God. Some have called it the vertical relationship in the first 4 commandments. The last 6 commandments teach us how we operate in society in line with humanity, morally operating within the guidelines of humanity. When Jesus summed up the law, he did it in 2 verses. 1 verse toward God and 1 verse toward man, and he said it this way: thou shalt love, this is by the way, I'm reading from Mark chapter 12 verse 30, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. Then he said this in verse 31, and the second is like, namely this: thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. It's like that, he says. It's in this way. And let me now just give a very, very short summary of each commandment as we saw them. Hopefully this will help jog your memory. If you're interested in a handout test that goes over each one of these that we've gone over, just contact me through the YouTube channel or Facebook and ask for it, and I can email it to you if you'll just send me your email address. There's 10 little tests that go with it, and it'll kind of help you just to check your knowledge and see what you have learned about it. So the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, shows us the person of our worship, who it is we are to exclusively worship. The second command gives us the program of our worship. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. So this is the way in which God is to be worshipped. He is to be worshipped without images, without idols, without pictures. None of this stuff is to happen. The 3rd commandment reveals us the practice of our worship according to his revealed will. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. We need to be extremely careful about using God's name and using it lightly, and we dealt with that in the deepest way of how we need to be very careful. The fourth commandment shows us the particular time of our worship, that there is actually a day of rest. God is to be served and honored on that day. Now, he's to be served and honored every day, but on this particular day, God sets aside for man, and it's found in Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. When you're told to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, how do you do it? How do you do it? How does it look? What's the practice look like to you? Is it a biblical practice? Is it something that like the apostles practiced? Is it something like the ancient church practiced? Is it something like the Orthodox Christians of days gone by practiced? Or is it a more modern similitude of that verse? Does it mean I'll go to church maybe in the morning, but I'm going to hit the lake in the afternoon, and I'm not going to give my time to the Lord? I'm going to play. I'm going to recreate. I'm going to get involved, because this is not how Christians have historically practiced keeping the fourth commandment. He tells us 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work, but the seventh is the Sabbath day. In it thou shalt not do any work, nor thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor the stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. Most Christians claim to believe the 10 Commandments, but they practice 9 of them, and the fourth one is usually one that's kicked to the curb. The fifth commandment sets up an obligation to our parents. And this, by the way, is the first commandment with promise. We remember that, don't we? It's in verse 12 of Exodus 20. Thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. And then commandment number 6. This shows how we're to operate in society. Nothing should be done to hurt another person without a proper cause. Exodus 20:13, thou shalt not kill. This doesn't have anything to do with killing a cow or killing a goat or killing a chicken. This has to do with taking another's life. This shows, Commandment 7 shows the order of society, in that there can only be order in society when the family is maintained within the proper bounds of morality. People must remain chaste. Exodus 20:14, thou shalt not commit adultery. And as we looked at it, it goes further than just a married man committing sin with another woman, but this is fornication. These are all types of uncleanliness, as taught later in the New Testament. Commandment 8 deals with the ownership of property and our resources. Society that allows thievery is soon going to degenerate to a completely selfish society. At this present time, in our society, on this date, this is June the 5th, and what we're dealing with is there have been all sorts of riots going on over the death of a man at the hands of a police officer, and this particular gentleman was choked out and died later by a policeman. And if the courts find that policeman guilty, he needs to serve the time for sure. But what the response has been thievery. People are breaking into businesses and taking things. I don't know how that's supposed to help this problem, but that's what people are doing. And sadly, our society is standing by and watching it. Instead of dealing with the miscreants as they ought to and punishing them for destroying private property, Exodus 20:15, the 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal. This is a moral command of God, and these people are doing it regardless. Their argument is, well, thou shalt not kill. So if I kill, I should also steal, because that makes killing, that nullifies the killing. You see the ridiculousness of this? May God have mercy on this society. The 9th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Of course, this reveals to us how we're to observe the rule of speaking the truth in love, whatever our situation. This is not just a courtroom situation. This is also dealing with individual speaking one to another. And the 10th commandment, the one we just finished yesterday, this reveals to us the, as we might say, the odious practice of covetousness. The person that covets something will soon seek to obtain the thing that is coveted. He desires it in his heart, and we know that covetousness is a sin that's manifested primarily in the heart. And when it becomes an action, then we all of a sudden become an adulterer, or we become a thief, or we become a murderer. And remember, Jesus said very clearly in the New Testament that if these things are already in our heart, then we are already those people. That's why the sin of covetousness is a real sin. It's a real transgression of the law of God. That's the definition of sin, when we transgress the law of God. So really, if you covet another man's wife, you are now an adulterer. So you've already broken that command. But hopefully, if you covet in your heart, you'll repent of that sin in your heart before it actually becomes now a physical manifestation where you've injured other people in the process. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Verse 17 of Exodus 20. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, or his house, his wife, his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Well, this was a short lecture tonight. I hope that we can pick up Monday with a brand new lecture. I'll see about putting together something else in our study. I did promise one of our members that we were going to do an in-depth view of the 4th commandment, as they had a lot of questions on that. And I'm sure if this individual who is astute in his Bible understanding, if he had questions on the 4th commandment, I'm sure many others have questions on the 4th commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And so I may put together a continued lesson on that. I've got quite a few resources on it, so I'll see what I can do about that. But we'll begin our next lecture, Lord willing, next Monday.